Hello, and welcome back to the library for another Dr. Wago on books. Did you ever wish when you were a kid that you wish you'd been born a prince? Read this book and you'll stop having that wish and you'll be glad you were never born a prince. Because, man, this is not a happy book. And I'm going to go into it in a little more detail. First, when I started Dr. Wago on books, I said I'd only do authors that had a series of books. Well, I'm lying again because this is his only book. Let's get into it. Spare by Prince Harry. You've probably seen the news. If you clicked on this video, you probably already have heard other people's opinions. And so just let me tell you right off the bat, before I even get into it, I think this book is worth reading. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Yes, he's a bit of a whiny little bitch. I'm sorry. He just is. However, once you read the book, you'll go, well, he's kind of justified in being a whiny little bitch because a lot of horrible things have happened to him. If you read the book, you'll think differently than what you've heard from other people who've read the book. Or, by the way, a lot of the things I've seen and videos I've seen on YouTube are people that actually maybe didn't read the book or just talking about what they've heard about the book. And by the way, you've heard all the salacious stuff. It's not a bad book. It's not a great book, but it is one of the best-selling books of recent years, and so I think it's worth talking about. And just off the top, I'll tell you, I'm glad I bought the book, not just because I enjoyed reading it, but because I'm glad I helped contribute a little bit to his financial independence, because man, did this guy get screwed by his family. You thought you had a dysfunctional family. Your brothers and sisters and step-parents don't have PR people planting false stories about you to make themselves look better. And that was probably the biggest revelation I had from reading this. I mean, I knew, because I'm not stupid, that most of the stuff that the tabloid press prints are lies. They make stuff up, except it turns out, after you read this book, you find out they're not lies that the journalists made up. They're lies that other people in his family, or actually more accurately, people who work for other people in his family, planting lies to make him look bad, to make whoever they work for look better, whether it's his stepmother, his father, his brother, his sister-in-law. They all have people, full-time people working for them whose job it is to handle the press. The book is divided into three sections, basically. The first section is his younger years. Basically, the book starts when Diana dies, although there are a few flashbacks to before then. Right off the bat, his mother died when he was a child and left him alone. And this is one of the things, the revelations of the book. As a child, he didn't believe she was really dead. He thought she had faked her own death so that she could hide from the press, so that the paparazzi couldn't chase her anymore. He lived with this belief most of his life, not just when he was a child, but as he grew into a young man. He still believed that she was alive out there and she was going to come for him someday. That's probably the saddest thing in the book. And it talks about his days in boarding school. And by the way, that's another reason not to be born a prince. Boarding school is horrible, horrible. And yet that's what the royals do. They send people off to boarding school. You don't have parents. You don't have loving parents the way we did. Well, actually, Harry had a loving parent named Diana who died when he was a child. Now, his father loved him, and he makes that clear, and he makes it clear in the book that he loves his father, who is now King Charles. But the politics, so the second phase of the book is his adulthood, and basically focuses on his military service, and the fact that he had trouble having military service because of the press again, because the press would reveal his location when he was in places like Afghanistan, which meant that then every Taliban fighter in the world is trying to kill him. And so the press made his life more dangerous. If you read this book, you'll come away thinking, well, I thought the tabloid press was bad, but you'll come away from this book thinking, The tabloid press is abominable and criminal, and most of these people should be actually in jail, which, by the way, is a thought that Harry shares, and in fact shares often, that he wishes that they were in prison. Especially the ones that like hacked the phones, if you remember those scandals. He kind of glosses over that. The other problem about being a prince, by the way, is no matter where you go, people are going to take pictures of you. So if you do something stupid when you're young, well, by the way, this is true for everybody. So no matter who you are, be aware that whatever you do can be on camera. And at any point in time, there could be a picture posted on the internet of you doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Like, I don't know, wearing a Nazi uniform to a costume party. Stupidity number one. It's a fascinating thing. And of course, you've all read about him, getting frostbite on his todger. It's a strange word for a willy, which is what most British people call it. But that's the story that got all the press. So the stuff that you read about this book is all the salacious stuff. But when you get right down to it, this is a broken man. It started with the death of his mother. He really didn't get therapy until well into his adult life. And then it was a lot of the things were too late. His family did not support him. In fact, actively worked against him in a lot of cases, where they were actively thwarting him. Especially, he has a very troubled relationship with his older brother, the heir. He's the spare, the title of the book. Because, like, when he wanted to do some more charity work in Africa, his brother forbade it, saying that rhinos and elephants are my thing. Africa can have multiple advocates. The level of selfishness and pomposity, which is one of the things, the reason he left. Oh, which brings us to part 3 of the book, Meghan Markle. When meeting Meghan Markle changed his life. If you read this book, the one thing you'll walk away knowing is that Harry loves Meghan. I mean, really loves. And she really loves him, because the crap they've been through, that they've been put through, is just abysmal. When things got bad and the press were basically publishing pictures of her children as monkeys. Yes, in England, they printed pictures of her like holding a monkey's hand and calling it her child. Very racist stuff, nasty stuff, just horrible stuff. Well, you read all this horrible things they're writing about her, and you understand why they said we have to get away. And there's a long thing where he goes to his family, and they basically have like a summit meeting where they're going to say, well, we'd like to step back. We still, maybe live in Canada, but we'd still like to, be part of the royal family and do some functions, but just be away from the press, especially the British tabloid press and the paparazzi, which he calls paps, which I guess if you're going to say the word paparazzi as many times as he has to say it in his life, paps is a good word. But he wants to be away from them. And the family decides, no, well, here are all the options. And they went through all the options. And the family decides, no, it's a clean break. Get out. You need to, if you're going to do this, you just need to get out. So he said, okay. And they work out some details. And then, so they move to Canada. They have the security and everything's great. And then their head of security comes and says that they've been recalled by the palace. They are to leave like immediately. His family pulled his security, putting his wife, children, and his own life at risk. Why? I can understand why this kid is messed up. His family actively worked against him. They actively worked against his wife, the woman he loved. And by the way, it wasn't just her. There's stories in the book about former girlfriends, one of whom much later ended up taking her own life because of some of the things. The paparazzi kept hounding her long after she was no longer in a relationship with him and no longer seeing him. They still hounded her. The thing I took away from this book is that the British tabloid press needs to be reined in. Oh, and while the book is going on, there's a thing where he and Meghan sue the press over the objections of his family. But they had to get the lawsuit in because they were actually in England relaxing the laws that were going to basically make it harder to sue the press for printing absolute total lies and from printing criminally obtained information like cell phone hacks. Oh, it's just, I feel so sorry for these people. Yeah, I know. Poor little rich people. They live in California now and they have all the money in the world. The other thing that at least I connected with Harry on, he's a stoner. He talks about, oh, and that's the other thing, that people talk about him as a whiny little bitch, but he doesn't sugarcoat himself. He talks about his drug use. He talks about smoking dope and using cocaine when he was in school. He talks about, he still got high. That's one of the reasons they live in California, and that's what in Canada, is because it's legal to smoke dope. And he's a stoner. God bless him. It's just, you feel bad for these people. There's even a thing he talks about when he was in Paris with his brother, the heir, Prince William, and they actually got their driver to take them through the tunnel where their mother died and drive through it at the speed they were going. According to Harry, they looked at each other and they instantly knew that it was not an accident, that there was no way that the driver lost control of the car in this tunnel. Somebody, probably a paparazzi or on a motorcycle or whatever, caused that car to swerve and basically killed their mother. Oh, and the reason he thought she was still alive is because in a lot of the pictures, of course, the paparazzi swarmed over taking pictures of the mangled bodies. She looked okay. She did not look that injured in these pictures. She was moving and she was alive. And so this is where he got into his head that when they took her to the hospital and then declared her dead, well, that's why he said, well, she wasn't really dead. She faked her death. I know, it's delusional. But if you read this book, you'll understand why he was so delusional. Because his life was not like a normal life. I walked away from this book saying, I am so glad I was born into a normal family where my parents only cared about the kids and didn't care about their own images and promoting their own images over their children, making their children look bad. Remember, Charles and Camilla had a lot of bad press, so they wanted to make themselves look better. Well, what way to make yourself look better than to make like your children look like idiots? And by the way, Harry helped because he did do a lot of things that were idiotic. There's lots of other reviews that'll tell you all the things he said in the book. But the main thing I took away was this man had a tragic life. I mean, starting with the death of his mother and then his family treating him like, again, in royalty, they don't treat you like a child. They don't care about you like a child. They care about you as, well, as he puts it, he was the spare. And that didn't just mean if the heir died. It meant like if the heir needed spare parts, like bone marrow or a kidney. Well, he was there to provide that. And by the way, it was told this from an early age, usually by his father, usually in a jocular manner, jokingly. Well, you know, you're the spare. Well, how would you like to be told your whole life that you're the spare? It's not a bad book. It's a good read. The stories all come from him, but they were clearly put together by someone who knows how to tell a story. So it's a fairly well-written book. I enjoyed reading it. It reads very fast. And of course, the editor, whoever his editor was, probably had a lot to do with this. His ghostwriter was excellent. He has a story to tell, a very sad story. Yes, there is a bit of poor little me in it and some whining, but then when you read the book, you go, well, I'd feel the same way. I'd whine about this. This is horrible to be treated this way by your own family. When you finish the book, you're happy for him and Meghan because they're finally away from all this nonsense. But it's kind of sad. It's like he and his family have just, they're broken. The family's broken apart. Again, if you read the book, not that big a deal because the family was kind of broken to start with. And of course, the whole thing ties back to Princess Diana. I loved Princess Diana. I thought she was fabulous. I was so impressed with her. And so I kind of love Harry because he's her child. What's my final take? I think you should read this book. I think this is a book worth reading. I think you'll get a deeper understanding of why Harry comes across as a whiny little bitch. And again, I think a lot of it is justified. After you read the book, you go, well, I think I'd be a pretty whiny little bitch if people treated me like that. And you take in a lot of hurt. And the hurt is also what drives him to the drugs. But fortunately, Meghan Markle, and I think one of his former girlfriends both pushed him towards therapy, which, by the way, the royal family, you can't be in therapy. It helped him accept the death of his mother and the fact that, no, she wasn't in hiding and she wasn't going to come save him. Which, again, when you read the book, in the back of his mind, he knew that, but he was living in denial for most of his life into his adulthood. By the way, Meghan Markle, she must be a saint. All the crap she put up with, I mean, well, she's either a saint or she really loves him or both. Because the stuff she went through, in fact, he talks about some of his previous girlfriends who bailed. They said, I can't do this. Of course, Meghan was an actress. Of course, that was one of the things the royal family hated about her. She was an American actress of color. The trifecta of people we don't want in the royal family. But because of the acting and being a public figure, she was used a little bit. She wasn't used to the vitriol and the hatred. My final take is buy the book. It's worth the read. Yes, you've already heard a lot of the big stories on the news and in the interviews on 60 Minutes and with Oprah. And maybe you watched the documentary. I never watched the documentaries. I didn't even watch the interviews. I saw him with Stephen Colbert. It really gives you a nice look inside a guy who basically just opens up his soul and says, look, this is who I am, and shows the bad along with the good. I'm really impressed with the guy. And, as a fellow beard wearer, I kind of feel a solidarity for Harry. So that's my Dr. Wigwam books for today. I think this is a great book. I think you ought to read it. I think you ought to buy it. Oh, important note. The audiobook is read by Prince Harry. So if you're into audiobooks, you can actually hear this all in his own voice, which I think is amazingly cool. So get the audiobook if you're that kind of person. I'm more of a reader. I don't listen to books. I read them. But I heard his voice as I was reading the book. It's a very personal book. I just really, really liked it, and I think you would too if you gave him half a chance. Even if you think he's a whiny little bitch, you read the book and you go, well, maybe he deserves to feel that way. So anyway, that's it for Dr. Wigwam Books. I'll be back next week with more gaming things, I think. We'll see. Come back and check. Thanks for stopping by. Bye-bye.